Hi folks, and welcome back to Fishing with Den. Today what we're going to be doing is building the feeder arm here and the rear rest to complement it. And the beauty of this is that it's cost me almost nothing to build. These things, if you're buying them in the shops, you know, upwards of £50 or more quite often. This one does exactly the same job, except that it's just based on the aluminium I bought for when I made my match fishing seat box. And this is the seat box, and if you haven't seen the video on that, I'll put a pop-up up there somewhere, and there'll be a link down in the description box down below. I've laid out the component parts of the feeder rest for you so you can see exactly what you need, and if I just move the camera down we can show you in somewhat more detail. So first of all then, this is the part that goes onto the legs of the box. I'll come back to that in more detail in a second. That's 120 millimeters long, and it's made out of the 38 by 25 by 2 millimeter aluminium that we use throughout this process for the box and the other accessories. This is 25 by 25 millimeter aluminium, again 2 millimeters thick, and that is approximately, bear with me, that is 620 millimeters. So overall we've got about 730 millimeters from end to end. I've also got this 20 millimeter aluminium and one of these 1 millimeter strips, and they're going to go inside both of these units here, and they'll be riveted down. So that'll hold everything in place. When we get to this end, we're going to have a 16 millimeter hole, and I'm going to put a threaded insert in there so I can put a knob on it to hold the rod rest itself in place. Now, this is the final rod rest. You're going to have to buy obviously the rod rest head, but I think they're about £5, £6, something like that. Have a look for yourself online. Obviously you don't have to have this particular one. You could have one of those long feeder rests as well. It's only screwed in, so you choose whatever's the most preferable for you. The actual length here is based upon one of these. Now these things are, well, they were when I bought them, dirt cheap. It's basically just the smallest, cheapest bank stick you can find. I've chopped the end off, and we've got the screw thread in here to take the head. Now it's actually 13 millimeters in diameter, which is a bit of a weird one because all of my drills go in 2 millimeter increments. So 12 or 14 or 16. So all I did was just sand this neck down a little bit. I chopped it off about here, sanded the neck down a little bit, and then just jammed it into this 16 millimeter tube. This has also got a thicker wall width than these things, which are relatively thin. This is 1.6 millimeter thick, so it just gives it a good robust nature, and that's probably 300 millimeters long. As I said, we will be putting a threaded insert in here, but we'll come back to that shortly. If you've been watching this series of videos, you'll have seen me cutting these holes before. This is that supporting bracket I mentioned right at the start. 25 millimeter hole. I cut it with a step drill, but one of those hole cutting drills would probably do just as well. What I've also done is run it through the table saw this way with the table saw blade about so high, so it gives me a hole down the middle there. And I've also taken it up just up here a little bit, so that when I squeeze it, it will squeeze in just a fraction easier. I've got a 6 millimeter hole going through from front to rear on here, and we'll be putting a bolt in there, as you've probably seen before. And in fact, if I show you on this one, it's going to wind up like that, and you'll be tightening down on the bolt. Now, when you're creating this hole, a word of warning, make this very smooth. I just cut myself a thin sliver of sandpaper and went around the inside and the outsides of these holes with the sandpaper so that when it goes down onto the legs, it's not going to mark anything. I've drilled two 4 millimeter holes in what's going to be the underside of this bracket, and I'm going to insert the 20 millimeter tube and the 1 millimeter sliver, like that. I'll make sure they're nicely squared up and centralized before I do this, but shortly now what I'm going to do is to put a couple of rivets in there, and that'll hold this support for the main arm in place. That's the first rivet in, and as you can see, this has gone off centre a little bit, but that's fine. Now I've got that one in, it holds everything in place quite neatly. So now I can recenter, and there we go. So now I can get the second one in. And that's the support block in place. Before I connect everything together, I'm going to go and drill myself a 16mm hole to accommodate the rod rest itself. And I'll be drilling that at 18mm centres in from the edge. So that's the 16mm hole done. I've made this, as always, a nice, fairly loose sliding fit, as you can see here. I've also cut the hole while I was at it to take the threaded insert. And of course that's going to have the little knob on it, which will be one of these wing nut knob here. Wing nut knob here. Wing nut knobs here. I wish I could speak English. Okay, so if you haven't seen the video on how to fit the threaded insert, which is called a riv nut, then there is a separate video, and I'll put a link. There'll be a pop-up coming up here shortly, and also I'll put a link to it down in the description box below. That just saves me having to do another 2 or 3 minutes, and if you've been watching this series, you're well used to doing this anyway, so you won't need that video. Of course, if this is the first one you've watched, well, you're going to need to watch the video. So that's the threaded insert in. Here's the rod rest, and you just tighten it off. And you can raise or lower it as you'd expect. Okay, so the final thing we have to do on this feeder rest is to fit this back part into here. In fact, it goes that way around, and I just need to rivet that together. I've just put a mark on here to indicate how far this protrusion comes out, so I know where to drill the holes. I put this on and literally hold that up against there, like that. Then I can drill in the knowledge that I should be pretty square on. And if I'm not, there'll be a little bit of adjustment later. As always, quick final check to make sure it looks about right, and that looks pretty good to me. So I'll hold it in place and just drill the second hole. So that's everything put together now. The only thing I have to do now is just to fit the bolt which goes through the back here, and I'll do this the other way around because I'm left-handed. And you have to fit a nut on the inside there, because this is going to lock down through. And if I just use this, correct way around hopefully. Now be careful on this, I've said this before, you get a lot of torque on these screwdrivers. So, I can show you there, I'm just holding it until it very gently reaches the locking point, and then just give it a quick nip up. Be very careful, you could break your wrist with this thing. Okay, so that's now on. A couple of washers. 1, 2, and then the knob goes on. Female knob, so it's going to be tightening up on it. And that's it. Leg goes in here. We tighten up on that. rod rest in here, and we're done. So now we've reached the point at which we need to make the backrest. And as before, this is going to be a support. This is a 25mm hole. It's exactly the same method of drilling and spacing as I showed you on the main feeder rest, so no need to go over that again. The front is a 16mm hole, again as before, and you've got a threaded insert. This is 180mm long in my case. Could be a little bit longer, could be a bit shorter. This is just my personal preference. So this is going to sit on the front left leg for me because I'm left-handed. If you're right-handed, of course, it would sit on the front right leg. Then what we're going to do is have the standard tube, that's 16mm, and you could actually just have a rod rest like this one, get yourself a butt cup or something like that, or you could just screw on a rod rest. Main thing is, if you get a savage take from a carp and it pulls it around like that, you don't want the rod to jump out of the rest. And that's why something like, not necessarily this butt cup, this is more for river fishing, but something that's going to hold the rod in position. And in the interest of keeping this totally cheap, because remember, virtually everything I'm using here is what I bought to make the box. So everything I'm making by way of accessories is actually almost free. And what I've done is I've just taken a piece of 3mm thick aluminium, just gone over to the vise and just bent it to that shape. What will then happen is I'll attach it to that piece of square aluminium like that, put that inside, attach everything all in one go, and then just put everything together. Bending wise, this is pretty much common sense. I'm just going to go through the real basics of it for you. First of all, I'm going to make this section and literally just pull it around like that. If you want to make it a nice tight joint, then that's that square. Then all you do after that is follow the angles as you see here. I'm not going to go through the whole process for you because you've seen how easy it is to do, and I've already made mine. So the only thing left for me to do is to actually fit all three of these parts together just with a couple of rivets, exactly as I showed you for the feeder rest. And this is where you need 3 hands or a hip, because you've got to hold things in place and also squeeze this. Okay, just make sure we're nice and straight and get the second one on. That's all the metalwork fitted together. You will have seen the rubberized section in the top. Obviously that's to protect the rod. And that's just a strip of this 3mm rubber, which is 25mm wide. And I just used a spray-on contact or impact adhesive, leave it to dry, and then just squeeze it together and contact, and it's done. You do have to just trim off a little bit around there because this is only 20mm wide rather than 25, but that's a simple process, and I've shown you that in some of the earlier videos anyway. Right, putting it together exactly as before really. That goes in like that. That goes on the front left leg in my case, as I say, and then of course we've got the feeder on the forward legs. So I suppose the best thing is, let me just show you it on the box. So, as we said at the beginning then, this is the front rest. It's fixed in position by the knob here. It can swivel around, it can go up and down. Same at the front by just undoing the knob here. Exactly the same as the commercially made ones that you see on the internet. And then obviously the backrest here. This sits on the forward leg of the box itself. Again, adjustment up and down on this knob here. And again, you can actually twist this forward and back to accommodate wherever your leg goes. Now with this one, I've got it set slightly across that way, but there's no reason, if I just put that down for a minute, there's no reason why you can't put it on this leg and use it as a normal rod rest. If I can reach down and grab this, for things like Waggler fishing. And obviously with the Waggler one, you'd probably want to put this on the back. Tighten up. Slight adjustments. Okay, and then as you can see, we've now got a comfortable position for Waggler fishing too. So it is a feeder rest, but it's also easy to transfer it across and make it into a normal rod rest. So that's it then, guys. It's all done. We're ready to go fishing now. So with that, I hope you liked it. If you did, as always, click the button. If you want to subscribe, you can. And until the next time, bye for now.